Trump has radically changed his position on the war. Putin is no longer a friend, and Ukraine must regain all its territories within the 1991 borders. And after that, even go further and advance into Russia. Meanwhile, Zelensky says that the US is ready to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. The president of Poland was so nervous at the UN General Assembly that he took drugs. The Ukrainian Armed Forces are preparing a new strike on the Crimean Bridge and are creating space forces. A massive drone attack on Russia targeted not only oil refineries but also Iskander missile bases. Hello, my name is Katerina Pagalchuk. Next, I'll tell you about the latest news at this moment. Yesterday, a session of the UN General Assembly took place. There was a lot of talk, but guess who surprised everyone the most? That's right, US President Donald Trump. And this time, no jokes or irony. He said some interesting and positive things regarding Ukraine. For example, Trump stated that he would impose very high tariffs on Russia if it does not seek a path to peace.
The US is ready to impose tough tariffs on Russia.
We've already heard about tariffs more than once, so here's something else. Trump essentially admitted that he was mistaken about Putin, and overall, Russia looks bad in this war.
I thought that ending the war in Ukraine would be the easiest because I have a great relationship with Putin.
In addition, Trump called China and India the main sponsors of the war in Ukraine because these countries do not cooperate with Russia.
China and India are the main sponsors of the war in Ukraine due to their economic cooperation with Russia.
Of course, there was also the traditional, "I'm great because I stop wars." Alongside this, Trump criticized the UN for its inaction.
What is the purpose of the UN? It has enormous potential, but it doesn't even come close to realizing it. Words, as long as they are stronger than actions, do not stop wars.
In short, when the White House said that Trump would deliver one of the biggest foreign policy speeches, they weren't lying. But that's not all, because there was also a meeting between Trump and the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. And this part was really interesting because Trump stated that he supports Ukraine's struggle and said that Ukraine is very successfully holding back the powerful Russian army. But at the same time, he can't clearly say whether he supports Putin. He promised to say in a month. But let's get back to Ukraine. Trump also spoke about security guarantees, more precisely that he can't talk about it.
We will talk about it. And I hope that we will have the opportunity to discuss it a bit later. Right now, it's too early to answer that question.
But that's nothing compared to the post Trump made on his social network after the meeting, because he wrote that he believes in Ukraine's ability to return to its 1991 borders and even beyond.
I think that with the support of the European Union, Ukraine is in a position where it can win the war and reclaim all its territory. With time, patience, and financial support from Europe and especially NATO, a return to the borders from which the war began is possible.
In a word, powerful. Volodymyr Zelensky also described the meeting with the US president as positive. He said it was one of the most meaningful conversations.
A very good meeting today. It's too early, guys, to talk about any elements of the meeting. A bit later, but it really was probably more substantial.
Zelensky commented on Trump's words about the 1991 borders and US support in general.
It was a bit of a surprise for me. I saw a very positive signal that Trump and America will be with us until the end of the war. We will see. But God bless, may it be so.
And also, Zelensky revealed details of the negotiation process with Russia, more precisely its preparation, which led to nothing, because the Kremlin is turning up its nose. It turns out that Ukraine even proposed holding a meeting with Putin in Kazakhstan.
He invited you to Moscow, you invited him to Kiev. Are you ready to meet him directly in a neutral place?
I did not invite him to Kiev. I said, well, look, if you don't want to meet with me, of course, in Putin's place, I mean from his side, of course he would invite me to Moscow. It's just a way to postpone the meeting. That's all. I said, it's the same thing if I invite him to Kiev. Yes, he has a choice. And Trump's team, my team, the Europeans, including Macron and other leaders, and the president of Turkey. I know that President Erdogan was in your... Yes, absolutely all of us, indeed all our dedicated teams have strongly suggested a significant meeting in Turkey or perhaps Saudi Arabia or even Qatar or alternatively in Europe, somewhere truly neutral like the beautiful country of Austria or the serene nation of Switzerland. So we said, even if you want somewhere like Kazakhstan, I mean, are you ready? Yes, we are ready. That's all.
And there's only one reason for this. Zelensky voiced it at the UN meeting as well.
That person is afraid to sit face to face with Ukraine and the world. And openly admit that he only wants war.
But aside from important and at times even historic statements, there were also a few odd moments at the General Assembly. I'll start with Trump. It's not exactly critical, but the US president had to walk up on foot because the escalator stopped working right in front of him. And during his actual speech at the General Assembly, Donald's teleprompter broke down. So he delivered his speech without it, but warned that whoever was responsible for the teleprompter would be in trouble. Interesting, how about that? Trump didn't blame Biden.
The teleprompter isn't working, and the person in charge of it is in big trouble.
But as for the president of Poland, he had no problems at all. He just sat there enjoying himself. This was his first session at the UN General Assembly. Still, he was a bit nervous, and to calm himself down, he popped some snus right there in the hall. Chewing tobacco, simply put. The Russian delegation also made a mark. I don't know why, but the Russians were recording Trump's speech with extra devices, using those evil Western technologies, iPhones to be exact. By the way, they're not even sold in Russia, so basically they were using some smuggled gadgets from Urkostan. A complete 180-degree turn. That's how experts and journalists describe the shift in rhetoric by US President Donald Trump during the UN Assembly. Against the backdrop of Trump's speech at the UN and his meeting with President Zelensky, the publication Clash Report writes that the head of the White House has radically changed his position on the war in Ukraine. Now, Trump not only supports Ukraine, but also believes in the borders of 1991. Yes, Trump definitely knows how to surprise. But how long will this tune last? Because maybe in a month he'll start trusting Putin again. The day before, the head of the Center for the Study of Occupation, Petro Andriushchenko, wrote that the occupiers have once again started using the Crimean Bridge to transfer equipment. For our part, we can say that this definitely won't last long because the special forces of the main intelligence directorate are powerfully striking enemy targets on the occupied peninsula, and the Crimean Bridge is definitely one of the future targets. More on the ongoing operations of our defense forces against the Crimean occupiers coming up next.
The Russians are having problems in Crimea, and the further it goes, the more surprises await the enemy.
Crimea is constantly, if we draw an analogy, thanks to the defense forces of Ukraine, it has turned into a kind of Krimobaivka, similar to Chornobaivka, where the Russian army and Russian occupiers are constantly being destroyed, along with their troops and equipment.
Ukrainian defenders clearly understand where the Russian occupiers are located in occupied Crimea and are doing everything possible to drive them out.
The work is active. The process of demilitarizing Crimea is ongoing. This is the main part of the deoccupation process.
In temporarily occupied Crimea, there are increasing problems with fuel, water, and military equipment. Ukrainian strikes are destroying enemy bases while the Russians are trying to hide the scale of their losses. We're talking about ground, air, and naval operations that our defenders are successfully carrying out.
Two, look, everyone, listen up. I need your attention, please. Now, Marines. We're moving in from here, from this very critical and strategically important location. With these unprovoked and devastating missile strikes continuously impacting our sovereign territory, this alarming situation is precisely what enables the Russians to systematically conduct incredibly extensive and highly detailed reconnaissance operations across the entirety of our vulnerable airspace, gathering crucial intelligence for their aggressive actions.
Enemy air defense facilities are being regularly eliminated, naval targets destroyed, and ground targets hit, including railways.
The air defense system in Crimea, which is currently very active and trying to repel strikes by Ukrainian Defense Forces, is not doing very well at it. Among other things, they are also being used as weapons of killing.
Problems with supplies are growing on the peninsula, and Russian defensive positions are being destroyed.
Work is also underway on those key points that will open the doors to Crimea for us, specifically the Kinburn Spit, the Tendrivska Spit, and in fact the territory of Crimea itself.
Almost every week, the destruction of Russian helicopters or air defense elements is recorded. This creates an atmosphere of fear among the occupiers and forces them to conserve resources. Ukrainian drones have even reached ordinary Dakas. On the night of September 22nd, explosions were heard in the Foros area. Russian collaborators reported that drones struck the territory of the Foros sanatorium. It was reported that 3 people were killed and
it has been confirmed that a total of 16 individuals sustained various injuries and were subsequently wounded during the incident, necessitating immediate medical attention and care. Presumably, these were members of the Russian Federation's armed forces. We have not seen any objective verification, so to speak, from the Russian side regarding the dead or wounded civilians. And that's the first thing the Russian Federation would have done if it had actually happened that way.
The Russians kept silent about the fact that at the time of the attack there were some very important guests at the sanatorium, though exactly who? On the sanatorium's public social media page, there was an announcement that on September 21st, the Foros Hall restaurant would be closed for special service. But on all Russian news channels, they are showing only the school, which is located nearby.
The assembly hall of the school suffered the most damage. Here, part of the ceiling has collapsed. Just look at what's left of one of the walls. From the damage, you can see that the drone flew in through this window. Now there are fragments scattered everywhere here.
The Russians, with the information about this school, which was closed for a day, not for the students, mind you, tried to use this information to cover up yet another of their terrorist attacks in our country. This is what the Russians always do.
Nearby is also government dacha number 11, the Zarya facility. There's a helicopter pad here, so the FSO is always present and they can be brought in to provide security for meetings. And of course, there is air defense.
We are demonstrating that today, with various means of firepower, our defense forces can reach the occupiers anywhere in our Crimea, anywhere in the north, in the south, in the west, in the east. And today, there is not a single facility in Crimea that cannot be targeted by the defense forces. Russian air defense has once again proven its incompetence. They are incapable of protecting either Russia or the temporarily occupied territories. The air defense system in Crimea is being destroyed, and this is the path to the demilitarization of Crimea and, most importantly, its deoccupation. We are on the right track.
The Russian aircraft fleet on the occupied peninsula has been reduced as a result of the successful combat operations of the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Special Unit Ghosts. 3 enemy Mi-8 multi-purpose helicopters were hit, as well as a Russian Nebo-U radar station.
4 helicopters were destroyed. In just a few days, 2 unique amphibious aircraft, the B-12 Chaika, were destroyed. There are very few in the Black Sea Fleet, if I recall correctly, 6, and 2 have already been destroyed.
The scouts showed footage of the operation and video of the wreckage of one of the destroyed Mi-8 helicopters. Occupied Crimea has become a symbol of fuel collapse. It was here that large amounts of fuel were brought in to refuel Russian military equipment. As a result, there is now a shortage and record high prices on the peninsula. The rise in gasoline prices is linked to Ukraine's strikes on Russian oil refineries. The video shows Sevastopol. In Yalta, gasoline was delivered to one of the gas stations. The line of people wanting to refuel is enormous. Neither the Russian authorities nor the occupation authorities in Crimea acknowledge the problem. They insist that it's all just a matter of logistics. Instances of human rights violations in Crimea are regularly documented and submitted to the UN Human Rights Council and the OSCE. The Russian occupation administration is forcibly conscripting Crimeans into the ranks of the Russian Armed Forces, and refusal to serve is punished with criminal prosecution. In addition, there is the ongoing militarization of children. Crimea is waiting to return, and Ukraine is not allowing Russia to normalize the occupation.
We have a satellite, now there will be space forces too. The Cabinet of Ministers plans to create Ukraine's space forces by December 31st, 2025. The details of the initiative are unknown, but this type of forces has been discussed before. I have only one question. Will these space forces cost astronomical sums? Russia, are you asleep? Last night, good drones carried out a raid across Russian territory, attacking Taganrog, Belgorod region, and Rostov region. In Lviv, Rostov region, the strike was so effective that the city was left without power.
Oh God, Mom.
What a nightmare. In short, just the kind of action we needed.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
The work of Ukrainian drones in the swamps can't help but bring joy. And it's not just about attacks on oil refineries or factories, but also on weapons training grounds. So, Ukrainian UAVs attacked the Molkino training ground in Krasnodar Krai. Our drones smashed about 8 Iskander launchers to pieces and damaged a Pantsir I system. This happened back on September 20th, but the results of the attack have only just become known. Poland was hit, let's move on. Apparently that's what they thought in Russia and once again sent their drones to the west. This time the Kremlin wasn't even targeting the Baltics, but the Scandinavian countries. Unknown UAVs were spotted in Sweden, Norway and Denmark. We'll tell you about the drone raid on NATO countries and the alliance's response in our report.
Unknown drones attacked Denmark and Norway on the evening of Monday, September 22nd. At Denmark's largest airport in Copenhagen, takeoffs and landings were halted after drones were spotted in the airspace. More than 35 flights were redirected to other airports.
We are observing a growing and concerning trend of numerous unauthorized acts of airspace intrusion, which are increasingly penetrating the sovereign territories and designated operational zones of the Northern Alliance. This escalating pattern of incursions is occurring with alarming regularity, and it is manifesting itself through both. This phenomenon is observed in various countries that are geographically close to Russia, sharing borders or being part of the immediate regional sphere, as well as in those nations that are located considerably farther away from Russia across different continents and geopolitical landscapes.
None of the 4 drones that flew over the airport were shot down. Copenhagen police stated that the UAVs disappeared. Denmark and Norway will conduct a joint investigation into both incidents of mysterious flyovers.
The drone incursion that we have witnessed in recent days was certainly not the very first instance of such an event. There have already been numerous violations of Polish airspace, not only by missiles but also by the infamous Shahed drones. It is simply the case that there has not been such a truly massive and coordinated attack, in fact, until now. I firmly believe that this particular incident was indeed a deliberate attack, a very serious and undeniable act of aggression, which was clearly aimed to, thank you very much, to clearly demonstrate their effectiveness and unwavering resolve. But I truly think that Russia possesses the capability to do precisely the same thing in numerous other countries across the globe as well.
In the Norwegian capital Oslo, an alert was also declared over the military zone of Akershus fortress due to drones. The drones were detected by the military. In connection with the incident, 2 people from Singapore were detained.
Here, it would be very important, of course, for the institutions of America to act more decisively and with greater resolve, but unfortunately so far, aside from some mere statements and declarations, we do not clearly see how truly ready the United States is, let's say, to effectively deal with the significant challenges that are currently present and unfolding.
Drones in Europe are more likely a common occurrence rather than news. Up until now, all unidentified drones have turned out to be of Russian origin. And it is quite possible that due to its impunity, Russia continues to test NATO's patience. The idea that the countries of the North Atlantic Alliance could have responded more decisively and shot down the aggressor's UAV over Estonia was voiced by Lithuanian Defense Minister Dovita Kalieni. She also recalled the example of Turkey, whose airspace was also violated by Russia 10 years ago.
It seems to me quite clearly that what we fundamentally have here is a significant and concerning lack of political will. At this particular stage, perhaps the nation of Estonia is genuinely afraid that Russia might somehow retaliate, but it will undoubtedly respond in a different and indeed a very asymmetric way. Most likely it could step up its subversive activities in Estonia. And considering that Estonia, a nation situated in Northern Europe, shares a significant border with the Russian Federation. As a result, a considerable number of ethnic Russians reside within Estonia's population. This could be a destabilizing factor.
Russian aircraft that violate the airspace of a NATO country should be shot down. This was stated by Czech President Petr Pavel. According to him, only such an adequate response will make Russia realize that it has crossed the line and made a mistake.
It seems we have yet another piece of evidence of China's assistance to Russia. A Chinese cargo ship has entered the port of occupied Sevastopol at least 3 times. According to the Financial Times, this refers to the container ship Hanyang 9, which under the Panamanian flag entered Crimea after the railway was opened. Of the 3 reported incidents, journalists have so far been able to confirm only 1. Citing Ukrainian officials, the Financial Times writes that Russia is using the ship to export goods from the Donetsk and Kherson regions. There are no limits to the Kremlin's madness. In Russia, they are spreading information that allegedly French soldiers have been spotted in Moldova. Attention, please. Right at a gas station. This brilliant fake was produced by the Kremlin in response to statements from the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service claiming that the European Union is planning to occupy Moldova. I have no words. And Russia has started spreading such narratives in the information space for a reason. Moldovan President Maia Sandu stated that Russia might use the unrecognized Transnistria as a staging ground for an offensive on the Odessa region. To do this, the Kremlin will try to seize power in Chisinau. What plan has Moscow devised, and what are the chances of it being carried out?
Everything will be decided in the coming weekend. By disrupting the elections, Russia is trying to seize power in Moldova and overthrow the government. After that, the country could be used as a staging ground for an attack on Ukraine. President Maia Sandu addressed the nation with such a video message.
If Russia gains control over Moldova, the consequences will be immediate, and they threaten both our country and the entire region. Freedom of movement could come to an end, and our land could become a staging ground for incursions into the Odessa region. The Transnistrian region will be destabilized.
Moreover, it is precisely Transnistria that poses a particular danger today, according to experts.
Let me remind you, Moldova shares a 1,222-kilometer border with Ukraine. Moldova is not a large country, but it is important in terms of infrastructure. Various projects connect us with Ukraine, so the stakes are high.
There, traditionally, the population holds the most pro-Russian sentiments, and it is clear that the Moldovan authorities have not done enough work with them over all these years.
The politician called on Maia Sandu to take control of Transnistria. This pro-Russian enclave is a huge problem today, not only for her country, but for the entire European continent. Of course, it's not solely her responsibility, but the leading role in this matter truly belongs to her. If she had initiated the appropriate processes and changed the agenda regarding Transnistria, she would have far fewer threats today.
The decision to fight was made only at the final stage. Less than a week before the parliamentary elections themselves, Moldova began identifying and detaining possible participants in the unrest that the Kremlin is already preparing for election day.
The police, together with the special services and the Information and Security Service, carried out operations to support these actions.
Thus, during searches on September 22nd in Moldova, 74 people were detained who are suspected of undergoing training in Serbia to organize rallies and protests. In particular, abroad they were trained in handling firearms and special equipment. For this, participants received about 400 euros. Law enforcement officers claim that Russian special services are behind the operation, and the suspects are connected both to Moldovan political parties and to criminal groups. At the same time, the investigation itself has been ongoing since July of this year. But the use of force is only part of the Kremlin's tactics. After practicing in Romania, Moldova also decided to use mass interference in elections.
This process is primarily facilitated and extensively carried out through various social networks, which serve as interconnected platforms where individuals and communities engage in a multitude of interactions, share diverse forms of content, and disseminate information across vast digital landscapes, thereby enabling widespread communication and fostering connections among users globally.
For those who are older and haven't mastered TikTok yet, there's a separate program. That same Russian Orthodox Church, which has assimilated in Moldova, still maintains its standard confessional goals: complete subordination to Moscow.
One of the concrete pillars of their identity, so to speak, is the Orthodox connection with Russia. Because this is a Turkic people, Orthodox, who, according to history, were supposedly resettled here by the Russian Federation. And so to this day, they express their gratitude in this way through their love for Russia. And so orthodoxy, specifically orthodoxy in the Russian style, serves as their point of connection, their channel of communication with Russia. And of course, Russia takes advantage of this as a way to strengthen its political influence as well as its economic and separatist influence over the regions.
At the same time, analysts remind us that Moldova's political system is organized in such a way that the parliament has significantly broader powers, including when it comes to the country's foreign policy direction. That's why parliamentary elections are perhaps even more important than the election of the country's leader.
It seems to me that, unfortunately, there is a lack of this understanding. If we talk about society as a whole, in percentage terms, there is not enough understanding of the extent of the enemy. Because I think, well, my God, how many times has it already happened? We had the pro-Russian Voronin in power, then he was replaced, then there was the pro-Russian Dodon, and again he was replaced. But all of that was before the illness of that very northern dictator reached such an extreme stage when he attacks neighboring countries and sends drones over the European Union. And I think that if this time we end up in his clutches again, it won't be as easy to get out as it was in the past.
Experts also believe that this week will remain tense right up until the elections, which will take place this weekend. At the same time, the authorities are urging people to stay vigilant around the clock, since this is essentially Russia's last chance to divert Moldova from European integration by relatively peaceful means.
The Kremlin lost the first phase of the hybrid war in the fall of 2024. When it actively tried to significantly derail the upcoming referendum and the crucial re-election of the current president, Maia Sandu, and now the intense political battle is currently unfolding for complete control over the national parliament.
Ukrainian veterans with prosthetics have conquered the Bonifacio Strait, which connects Corsica and Sardinia. Veterans with amputations covered almost 13 kilometers in the water despite rain, thunder, and waves. It took 4 hours and 50 minutes to complete the distance. The swim across Bonifacio is an official marathon distance. It is quite challenging because its length is not constant. In addition, the strait is known for its strong currents. That's all for now. Don't forget to leave a comment under this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell so you don't miss our next episode. See you